Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
And welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? This show's not going to be a single interview. It's going to be more of a roundtable show. I'll get to that in a moment. It is a live show. If you're listening on WVBR on Saturday night, you can come into the chat room at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's on the right-hand side a little further down. I'm not sure where it shows up on a tablet or a phone, but it's there somewhere if you want to join the conversation or ask any questions. Eventually, I'm going to come up with a way just to have people shoot us messages from one format rather than dropping messages all over the place because people don't seem to come into the chat, so it may go away. But we'll see. Here we go. So go, talk to us in the chat. But tonight, I have with me one of my regular co-hosts, Joshua Cutchin.
Greetings.
And we have Jeff Ritzmann back.
Hey, sir. Nice to be here.
And we have Roejen from Project Archivist.
Hello. How are you?
And Roejen, Jeff, and I just finished an episode of Project Archivist along with Lobo. And if you have not checked out their show, you need to. It's one of my favorite podcasts, easily. And you guys are fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And you do some different stuff. You don't just do interviews. Sometimes it's just the two of you talking about stuff, and sometimes you do some found audio stuff.
We do all kinds of stuff. Like, You're not
just a paranormal show.
Yeah, it doesn't define what we do. Cover a lot of paranormal. We try to cover things in a different way, or try to cover stories that haven't been covered a million times, or get guests on that haven't been talked to a million times, or are out making the circuit. Sometimes we just like to do silly shows where we unwind and just cover stupid news stories or what have you. Really, it's we don't have a set format. It's really just kind of whatever the show needs at the time, or whatever happens to fall into our lap, or if we just feel like being stupid that week for the most part. So, it's just we're pretty much we call ourselves home of the wonderful, the weird, and the strange, for the most part. It's not like, okay, well we got to cover UFOs this week or blow it. It's just whatever happens to come along.
Yeah, and sometimes you just have listeners that have interesting backgrounds or, things.
Well, we like to. There's so many shows out there that, like, one of the reasons I really like your show, because you're very similar to what we do. You will get authors on that most people haven't heard of, or people haven't heard of before, as opposed to getting like, such and such has got a new book out, we got to get them on, and then you'll hear them a week later on another podcast, and then a week later, and their interviews become very cookie cutter and so forth. Whereas, I like to dig a little bit deeper and talk to people that maybe have an interesting blog, or maybe have a book out there that somebody hasn't heard of, but is still a very interesting book. Because in my opinion, those people need just as much exposure as, whoever the big paranormal guy is who releases a book every month or what have you, or every 6 months he's got a new book coming out or something like that.
You mean Nick Redfern?
Yeah, well, I didn't want to say Nick, but yeah. I've tried to get Nick on the show, but I've had a hard time getting him on. But the thing is Nick I love the guy. I love what he has to say,
and I like his work.
Yeah, exactly. But he's on every show every week, and whenever a new book comes out, he kind of hits the circuit, and it's like, well, what am I going to ask him that hasn't been asked of him 100 times already? So. Well,
hey, I'll give you guys credit on your 200th episode. You came up with some questions for Stan Friedman I'd not heard him talk about before.
We put a lot of thought into that one. That was kind of one of our trickier shows to do. And before we talked to him, I talked to him on the phone. I said, we're going to have you on, but we're not going to talk about this, and this. We're interested in these kinds of things and this and that stuff. And I think he enjoyed it. I don't know. I'm kind of torn if he enjoyed it or if he didn't like it, because in my opinion, I felt that there were times where he was like, because he's got a standard cookie cutter, thing that he goes into about MJ12 and all that. And we're not even remotely interested in that, because you've already said everything you can about that. We want to know about these nuclear projects you've done. I want to know about your early years getting into this stuff and how the people you've met that were strange. I think he did enjoy talking about that, because that was stuff that we were genuinely interested in, and he doesn't really get to talk about very often. But at the same time, I think he kind of missed the comfortableness of knowing how an interview was going to go by talking about the same same stuff all the time. But I've also been told that it might have just been in my head. But everybody seems to have enjoyed the interview that we did with him. So,
Yeah, and he's not someone I would listen to because he has that sort of nuts and bolts UFO thing that I'm not that interested in. I'm just tired of hearing about at this point.
Yeah, but he still is somebody that's been in the field for a long time. Sure. And I still respect what he has to say. He's not as crazy as some of the people that are out there, but I was interested in his background and what led him to believe what he believes and what he bases those things on and the experiences that he has had to lead him to that point. And I find that far more interesting as to what leads people to believe what they believe and how they believe. It's not so much, well, I believe in this, this, and this. Well, great, but what led you to believe that? What formed your opinion? What put you in that mindset to get you into that idea or into that world? And that's another important thing. It's one of those questions that it's just not asked enough, because maybe you might not agree with what the guy has to say, but it's still curious to see how people's viewpoints work. And
Absolutely.
So, a lot of times people just look at somebody and say, oh yeah, this guy's nuts or whatever and blah, 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 or, well, what led him to believe that? Why does he think that way? Is he just somebody that's out there to make money off of people or something like that? And if he is, then maybe asking these questions will some way reveal that. And if not, maybe it's just that he sees things a different way, and, maybe we try to understand why that person's doing what they're doing. And
Jeff, when you were last on for our 3-part episode, because I think I think you have the record for the longest time I was on Skype in one session.
That was a marathon.
We went for 6 hours and 8 minutes.
Wow.
And about 3.5 was the show. And we talked like an hour beforehand. We did an hour and a half of a show. Then we talked for a half an hour afterwards. And then you mentioned you played in a thrash band. And that created an hour-long conversation about music.
Yeah.
And
I can go on.
And the recording software I used did not like it.
Right.
I shut everything off, and I went to copy the file over, and it was a full-size 4-gigabyte file, and it played 4 seconds. And I went, oh, no, because it must not have closed it. It must have been too long, and it didn't know how to close the file. But luckily, it still played in the recording software, and so I just played it and recorded it on different software.
There you are.
But, yeah. But the last time you were on, you were just starting this Project Oculus with this GoFundMe.
Right.
And how has that gone so far?
We got totally funded for the cameras, which was the best thing ever. So I was able to order those before too awful long, actually. I mean, it was a pretty good groundswell for a while, which was great. So we got the cameras. Those are installed. They're running. They've been running every night for the most part. They didn't last night because, I woke up at 5 o'clock this morning with my glasses stuck to my face. So I fell asleep on the couch. So that's why they didn't run last night. But usually every night they're running around 2 a.m. to morning to daybreak. And as I just said on Project Archivist, we've gotten, nothing. I just want to put a public service message out there. If you are having disturbing paranormal events in your house and you're literally terrified out of your mind, dropcam.com, put 4 in your house, you will never see another thing again. No, I say that in jest because we did actually get a couple of interesting things. And I should say that thanks to my donors, I was able to not only buy the cameras, but to fund the monitoring of those cameras for a few months. And also buy an EM meter, natural EM meter, which has been pretty invaluable because I run that every night on one of the cameras so that it's visible in the frame.
Yeah, and you had that go off at one point.
We did, and it never goes off, trust me. So that was on a clear night where there was nothing that should have done that, and so we got a pretty significant spike of about halfway. Nothing visual on the cameras, nothing that I saw personally, but that's unusual. And so the other thing was, there has been people in the house, myself, my immediate family, my parents, anybody who spent any time here has seen a small light at the just below the ceiling level in our living room. It's a light, and it normally appears to people in their peripheral, but it's really in their peripheral. To the point where Jeremy was here and he said, "What?" I saw it and I kept my mouth shut, and And he said, what? And I was like, yeah, that's it. So it's really visible. It's really in your face, but most times it's peripheral. We've never been able to get it. Well, we got it on the cam that monitors the living room. And again, not to repeat myself if you just listen to Project Archivist, but that was only caught by one camera, which I was monitoring at the time live, and no other camera. But it is a three-dimensional light in the room casting a reflection on the ceiling. We got something, so it's significant.
That almost suggests to me that it's directly interfacing with your consciousness because it was on the camera you were looking at.
Yeah, you think? Yeah, I think so. It's and I should say that that there was. I'm working with an author because I just can't seem to get myself in gear enough to write my book, which I've been trying to author for 5 years or more. And so I finally got with an author who is published. She's amazing. She's a great writer. And so we've been having, we'd had some marathon sessions, not so different from you and I talking that night, like literally 5-6 hours. And sometimes it gets really deep and really intense really quickly. And, listeners of the old show Paratopia that I did with Jeremy Vaney will know that we did some shows sometimes where some strange things happen during the show, during those kinds of discussions, almost as if in response to going in certain directions with a certain amount of focus and intensity to the discussion. And that's what happened that particular night, and only that night, that we got the light on the ceiling. That was that night. We had not spoken before to that level during Project Oculus before. So I think that also says something, that the night that you get something, this is what is happening in the life. Because I'm always asking people, what was your life like at the time? Forget the paranormal event. What were you doing? What was going on? What was the situation with you? And so I can't deny, completely anti-structural day, completely, like even the conversation with you, even though it gravitated into other things, it's highly unusual for me to be on Skype for 6 hours. It's just, when you meet a new friend, that's just what happens. Like you could talk to them forever. So that's just how it goes. And so, yeah, we got something.
Nice. Well,
so
for tonight's show, Josh had initially, his first suggestion was that we talk about the role of the repeated experiencer versus somebody who has a single event. And why, I guess my thought would be, why would someone have a singular event as opposed to repeated events throughout their life?
Yeah, it's sort of confounding because there are enough times when people do have singular events, but at the same time there are plenty of people who have repeat things happening, and plenty of people have what we would categorize normally as different phenomena, even though I think that there's some sort of underlying connection between all of them. But yeah, it's something that I've been turning over in my head for some time now.
Well, in that situation, where do you start then? Do you start with the initial experience, or do you take the experiences as a whole and look at them? True. And what would quantify as an experience? Well,
and look at Strieber, too, who would have sworn up and down that he didn't have any experiences until the one that woke him up, and then he remembered all this other weird stuff that happened in his past.
That's true.
Yeah, but there's also, I mean, and this, to simplify this down to the easiest way to put it, a whole lot of people have a whole lot of weird stuff that goes on. And I was no different from that. I did not connect the dots in any conceivable way to some very random, weird stuff that happened to me pretty much since kindergarten, right? And then it takes like that one event that is fairly in your face and undeniable to make you go, oh, so was that this? Was that connected to this? And so on and so forth backwards. So how many people don't connect the dots? How many people just go, well, I don't remember what happened when I was 5 years old or 6 or 7. yeah, maybe something a little weird, but whatever. Like, does everybody hold on to those kinds of experiences with the same, I guess, fervor that I did? Because these were some of the most prevalent memories that I ever had of being a child, was those particular weird instances. So how many people just don't put any mind to things that happened when they were little or growing up, until they have that pinnacle moment? See, I'm one of these people. I'm one of these people. I don't think people have singular experiences. I think there are just so many minor experiences that the connection is never really made. But I also think that the paranormal experience is far broader than we think that it is. In other words, I almost believe that just about everyone has had some kind of odd experience in their life.
I was just going to say the same thing. In my experience, with what I do with the show and stuff, I'll tell people, hey, I do this crazy show or what have you, because I normally don't tell people what I do. It's one of the reasons I use a pseudonym. But after when you tell people I do this kind of a crazy show, whatever, I usually get a couple of different reactions. I'll get the first reaction of, yeah, whatever, I don't believe in any of that kind of stuff. And then I'll get the reaction of, yeah, you're weird. I know all that stuff's kind of weird. And then once they get to know you, you'll get the people that are like, can I tell you something without you thinking I'm strange? And then they tell you their story. And then you get the people that are like, oh, yeah, I fully believe in this, blah, 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 blah. And these are the experiences I've had and things like that. And those are the people that I kind of like, okay, whereas the people that are like a little bit hesitant, the ones that come out and tell you their stories. But even with the people that are like, I don't believe in any of this stuff, I think it's garbage, and I think what you're doing is silly, they usually sometimes or never have a story themselves, but they don't necessarily regard it in, the idea of the paranormal. They'll say, yeah, but it's and I find myself doing this as well. Well, it could have been this, it could have been that, or this was going on, or something like that. Again, I referred to when you were on our show, as I refer to it as being like tone deaf or colorblind. It's like, well, maybe you just can't see or don't want to see what is happening to you for the most part, and just choose not to see that for the most part.
Yeah, even someone like myself, and I really don't really consider myself much of an experiencer at all, but when I really sit back and look in aggregate at even the things that were really kind of small in my life, they do tend to add up. And, my wife is someone who's extremely skeptical about all this stuff, but she's had some things happen to her, too. When you pressed her, she's like, well, there was that one time when my boyfriend decided to not go through a green light and two cars ran through the red light. It's just weird stuff like that people don't normally always put into the paranormal box, but that if you follow this stuff long enough, it definitely has that same sort of mouthfeel as other events.
Yeah, like Jeff, me and Jeff are very similar in ways that we're both married, and we've both had things happen to us where, fortunately, our wives are cool enough to accept that as part of being married to us, where I've had strange things happen, and my wife used to be like, well, that really weirds me out or whatever. Now it's just kind of like, all right, well, it still weirds her out, but we just kind of shrug our shoulders and move on. A lot of stuff.
I think what's great about wives is, particularly my wife, is she says, yeah, this stuff's a little weird, but I don't have time for it.
That's the kind of reaction.
Like it's okay for me and her to be in the condo that we used to live in and be looking at each other across the room. She's laying on the couch, I'm sitting in a chair, and to have an arm float through the room with a flannel shirt on. And to go, yeah, that's weird, but I don't have time for that.
That's kind of the same reaction that I get. There's a little bit of the curiosity, strange factor, but ultimately it's like, well, I got to get up and go to work in the morning. Yeah. So
I got clothes to fold,
Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of thing. It's whereas in my life, the things that happen to me, I have had strange experiences, but the prevailing over thing in my life that is the quote unquote weirdness is a lot of synchronicities that happen. That for the longest time used to really bug me, but now I just kind of shrug my shoulders and say, yeah, this is how the roller coaster goes, and it still weirds my wife out at times. She'll be like, how does this happen to you? Why does this happen to you this way or whatever? I don't know. Just take it as it comes and keep moving.
I always look at synchronicities as the universe telling you you're on the right track.
In my particular case, I'll come to obvious, I'll say crossroads. And if I choose to keep going and not go down the crossroad will eventually come up until I decide to make some kind of churn on that crossroad.
Yeah,
if that
absolutely.
makes any sense. And they've led me into some very, not necessarily bad situations, but very strange situations where you sit back and you look at it and you're like, that could not have happened any other possible way. And I'll find myself like, I'm like, all right, fine, I'll turn down the road. Just leave me alone. You know, I don't got time for this, you know?
but it's something you need to deal with probably.
Yeah, it used to really bother me for years. It bothered me because it felt like it's this kind of free will kind of thing where it's like, you know, that you have a choice in life, you affect your choices and things like that. And it kind of felt like, no, I don't. It's an uncomfortableness where it's like, okay, I don't have the choice. I keep being presented with this, and I'm going to keep getting presented with this particular thing, whatever it is at the time, until I decide to make the choice to deal with that or to go in that direction. But ultimately, I think there is still choice of one kind or another. It's like, even though, you know, you have to go down this road, but what you do when you're on this road until you get to the next intersection, you know, from point A to point B, you're not on a set path, but eventually the river's going to lead you here. You know, you can paddle this way or you can paddle that way, but the river's going to take you to this. The road's going to take you, or the river's going to take you where it takes you.
I almost feel like there are certain set points in our lives that, you know, we have to experience this. We have to experience this. How we get to it and when we get to it may change.
Yeah, it's like a Doctor Who kind of thing. It really is. You can't change. Yeah, Jeff, have you ever experienced anything like this before?
Synchronicities?
No. Yes.
Yeah, but usually it's like the universe, like I like the way that Seriah put it, the universe telling him X. Usually when synchronicities happen to me, it's the universe telling me it's 111 or 222 or 333 or 444. Hey, look, isn't that neat? And I go, no, because I've got like a cell phone full of grabs of when I look at the, you know.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you.
No, you will look at this.
I'll tell you a really... the last really weird one, and I don't know if this falls into the same category of that, but some years ago, it's probably been 2 or 3 years ago, my wife and I were driving up the road to get some supplies for the pond that we have in the backyard. And for some unknown reason, we were driving down the road, no one around. I mean, empty road, Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock, something like that. And out of nowhere, this truck comes from behind us and pulls up beside of us and points at my front wheel and says something. And my wife rolls down the window to say, "I'm sorry, what's going on?" He begins cussing wildly. And we're like, what is going on? Like, we didn't cut anybody off. We didn't do anything.
It's your face.
The next thing you know, he spits into the car.
Oh,
right? So I am halfway between murderous rage and what? What? Like, this is so... What? And so he tears off, and I try to get a tag number. I'm trying to follow him. This guy's gone. I'm caught in traffic. I got to wait for the light to change. I think about this guy every once in a while. I'll get on a tear driving home where I'm thinking about this guy and what would have happened to me had I gotten a hold of this guy. I pray that none of you ever have to have an experience as confounding as that. But also as, like completely emasculating as that was to me, not to be able to do something. And so I think it was the last couple of weeks, I went home and I was thinking to myself, like, I should have done this. There's always those feelings of what you should have done, how you should have reacted. I could have opened the door and got out and looked and saw his tag number. It was so quick. You didn't know what to do. Going over in my mind over and over. And before I knew it, I was home. I had gone over this the whole way home. The next day, the guy is in front of me in traffic going to work. It's him. It's the truck. It's him. And I'm like, I haven't seen this truck, this person, in 2-3 years. Why today when last night I was focusing on this like all the way home? Like, that to me was truly just utterly bizarre. And of course, I'm not going to go into detail about the drive to work, but it's just it's those kinds of things that I'm like, how did that just happen when I was just thinking of this? And this has not been in my field of vision for years. That to me is just beyond the pale of how could that possibly have been coincidence?
Yeah.
I don't believe in coincidence, but how could anybody blow that off and go, no connection there?
Well,
No.
one, clearly your front tire did something very offensive to him.
Clearly. You know?
The bigger question, though, is did your brain happen to just randomly go to that and then you pulled together a situation in reality where you ended up behind him? Or did you know somehow that you were going to end up behind him and that future knowledge reminded you of the situation?
And see, you know, I
You're
go back.
making my brain hurt.
No, I go back to that old thing of, you know, and this applies as far as I'm concerned to, you know, to my involvement with paranormal stuff. It's like what you think about, you bring about.
Yeah.
And, you know, and you can call that whatever you want. Some people group it into the secret thing, which I think is incredibly pedestrian to do, but you know, some people think of it in that term, and that's fine.
Well, you know,
but, you know,
the secret thing is just a watered-down version of what Jane Roberts Seth said, and I think Jane Roberts and Seth were way more grounded in what they were talking about and made a lot more sense.
I think it's, I mean...
Well, in a... Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, like, in sort of a Dean Radin-y precognition-esque sense, I mean, it would make sense that these are ripples that we're interpreting that we're going to encounter this. I mean, for me, my particular synchronicities always occur whenever I'm working on some sort of big project or a book or something. You know, and they'll sort of tend to lead me down the path. I maybe this is just sort of a personal view, but I feel like God, the universe, whatever, probably doesn't really care about my next book in terms of making like the planets align and like draw, you know, like make things happen so that
No, you don't understand. Josh's book is coming out. We have to do this.
Exactly. You know, it's a little self-centric for me to think that that I'm bringing that into fruition, which I mean sort of runs counter to a lot of like magical lines of thought. But it does make a lot of sense to me that there might be some sort of precognitive aspect to it in that sense. The only thing that sort of makes me question that is the other times that I do experience these synchronicities are when I have sort of my faith in either my path or in my life shaken, and I'll see some sort of synchronicity that tends to reassure me, although that totally, of course, could be observer bias in that case.
True. I had in a similar sort of thing, and I don't know if you want to call it even a synchronicity, it was just something that made me laugh when it happened in a sense. I had, years ago, I was short on money, and I said, man, I could really use like $2,000 right now. And so I just out loud to the universe said, could I have $2,000? And then just continued on with things. And the next day, I'm driving home, and this deer runs out in front of me. And this deer was absolutely dead set of getting in front of the car. And it hits the car, just takes out the headlight, but the car slides off the road down a ravine. And this is down this steep ravine, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm dead. Because I'm doing like 60. I can't steer. I can't stop. All I see is a line of big trees in front of me. I'm like, yep, that's it. I'm dead. And the car stops like it landed on a cushion. And I'm like, how am I not dead? All right. Well, it turned out it fit in the only hole in the trees, at all, and it was the exact size of the car. So it kind of went in, slowed the car down, and stopped it. So they pull the car out. The car's mostly fine, but it wasn't worth a lot. And so I call my insurance company. They're like, we're going to total it. I'm like, I don't want you to total it. It's totally fixable. And he's like, no, you can keep the car and fix it. He's like, but we're going to give you the value of the car. You can't put comprehensive coverage back on it. And I'm like, okay, well, that sounds fine. And he's like, so after your deductible, that would be just about $2,000.
And a dead deer.
Yeah, and I just started laughing, and he's like, and I'm like, no, never mind. It's just clearly a cosmic joke.
I mean, again, that's sort of a very magical thing. I mean, like Crowley used to, whenever he needed money, would go out and order caviar and champagne. You know, he would act like he had money in order to get money, which again is sort of like a secret reworking of these sort of concepts. But I don't necessarily know
Yeah, that concept never worked for me because I've done that before.
You just end up pouring drunk. You know?
And Seriah, I think you started that account with the right thing to mention was that I thought about it and then I forgot it.
Right. No lust for result.
And
that's how chaos
and
magic
that's it.
works.
I mean, that if you read a lot about these magical practices and whatnot, you can go from the standpoint of sigil magic, right? So you do the thing, you charge it, you forget it, and then it's incredibly hard to forget these things. It's incredibly hard to make yourself forget what you just did that you know is going to happen. After you've just convinced yourself it's going to happen, because this is what every magical practice demands is it's going to happen. That's it. It's already done. I'm just waiting, So has nobody at this table, have any of you noticed that when you think about something once and forget it or become occupied with something else, that invariably that thing will happen?
I have had opposite results. I can't attest to that, actually. I can't... I've tried it. It has never really worked for me. I have quite the opposite, where things are presented to me and I have to address them. So I have, I guess, the exact opposite of that effect, though. I've tried that, though. I've tried the whole thing of I'm going to ask for this and then try to forget about it. And my answer to it was you ask for multiple things to where your brain, by nature, will forget, one of those kinds of things or what happens. So if you do multiple things, it makes it easier for me to forget about it. But it's never really worked out for me that way. So I don't know. Maybe. Whereas maybe that's just my manifestation of it, is the synchronicities of things. But even those I don't ask for the most part. When those things happen, it's a frustrating process.
I guess it's the point of everything that you seem to worry the most about never happens. Everything that's present in your mind that you worry with such gravity about never seems to come to fruition. But the things that you think about one time and seem to move on quickly because something else may take your attention away from that particular thought. It may be that fleeting. That is the thing that will end up happening.
I don't know. I don't know if I can agree with that. But then again, I'm not everybody, so I don't know.
and this becomes a completely different conversation for someone who is diagnosed OCD like me. Because you end up worrying about things that are negative that you don't want to happen, and it sort of muddies the waters in general.
Maybe it comes down to a thing of a frame of mind. You have to be in the proper frame of mind to make it work. Because again, that's one of the tenets of magic too. It's like you said, you have to believe it's going to happen. And because I'm not necessarily a believer in the practice of magic, though I do find the studies of it very fascinating, maybe that's why it doesn't work that way for me.
And in the chat room, Steve Ray says, couldn't those recurrent choices be a form of temptation from an adversary? And he says, and to Joshua, on a similar note, why presume that it's God breaking into his orderly universe to sink out at you? Aren't there fae folk themselves that resonate as a source for the lesser high strange, especially since they probably would notice you, what with all the books you write on them?
Yeah, well, I think that's Steve, the omnipresent Steve Ray, as I like to call him. I think that's something that I've sort of become a lot more interested in with my interest in sort of magical practice, is this idea of intercessor spirits. Still being a Christian, I tend to think of those in patron saint terms, but those who tend to practice more robust forms of magic would absolutely say, there are higher powers that you just cannot approach on your own. You have to sort of find some sort of more relatable spirit and do something with them, and at that point they will intercede for you. And I'm going to be sort of deliberately oblique about this, but I think that there's some very strong arguments that are in support of that in terms of making some sort of not sacrifice in like a pagan sort of way, but a sacrifice in terms of some sort of sacrifice of time or sacrifice of intention to something that's a little bit more tangible, a little bit more on your own level, that can intercede for you with some sort of higher power. I think there's something to that.
I was going to say, because that's Christian practice, essentially, not to be rude or belittling in any way, shape, or form. We've discussed this on my show, where Christian faith is essentially a form of magic. You're still your praying is essentially a form of incantation. You're willing and you're asking for something of a higher power to intercede, to be able to do something on your behalf or on behalf of somebody else. It's the intention and the strength and the will that you're putting behind it. Even though you're praying to God or Jesus or whatever your higher form of power would be for you, since you state that you're a Christian, you'd be praying in those areas. It's all still ritual. You're still,
absolutely.
But there's a lot of people in the Christian faith where I've had this conversation, they get really offended by that. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's just how these things work, Well,
it's an easier conversation to have if you have someone coming from a Catholic or Anglican faith, where you do have these sort of this idea of patron saints that that you can actually call upon, that can sort of be intercessors. You run into a greater problem with people who are Southern Baptists, where it's like, no, you have a direct line to God. Well, I do feel that that's true, but also like, can't hurt to have all your bases covered in that.
Even if you still have a direct line to God, though, even in that situation of the Southern faith, you are still invoking a higher power to do something on your behalf. Be it like with magic or whatever. With magic, you're doing an invocation and you're doing a spell or whatever to get some form of power to do something on your behalf as well. So it's one of those things, like there's a book, The Long Lost Friend, which is a book on Pennsylvania hex magic.
Looking at that earlier today.
Yeah, that is essentially a Christian magic book that has very much fallen out of practice, because if you try to mention that to somebody who's in the Christian faith nowadays, well, that's all gobbledygook and nonsense, and they don't even look at it to see what it is. It's essentially a book of prayers for the most part. And that was what people, if they couldn't afford a doctor, they would get a clever man to come in, and this person would come in and perform this hex magic over somebody, but essentially it's all magic. Nowadays, that book has fallen out of practice and favor. So if you try to bring it up to somebody, they'll either laugh at you or think you're strange or something. But it is essentially a book of Christian magic. It's
right. And even in the Southern Baptist faith, you'll still find people. I would estimate that most Southern Baptists would still believe in the concept of guardian angels, which is basically the same idea. This sort of lesser spirit that sort of interacts on your behalf with the universe, with the cosmic egg.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Now, as far as what Steve said about synchronicities with me, I don't necessarily believe that it's something from the outside trying to sway me in a bad way. If we have time, I can give you a quick story if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Okay. When I was younger, me and my mom had a falling out. She had a lot of issues with drugs and things like that and lifestyle that I didn't really agree with. And when my children came along, I pretty much cast my mom out of my life. I said, you know what, I could never do these things that you've done in front of my kids or whatever, because be the parent that you were. So I completely lost contact with her for about 15 years. No idea where she was, no idea where she, either one of us were. I'd been told she'd moved out of state. This completely gone. A situation came up where she was trying to find me and ran across somebody who has a very similar name to my real name and called them, and that person knew me and said, hey, your mom's looking for you. Here's her phone number. Give her a call. I said, you know what? I don't want to do that. I'm not really interested in talking to her right now. I've moved on, et cetera, so on. Fast forward again. Later on, my cousin was in a part of the state that's literally out in the middle of nowhere. It's this little town in the middle of nowhere, and they had to stop there to get gas. My mother was coming up to Michigan taking a bus, and the bus stopped in that town very quickly to let everybody use the bathroom and get some gas or whatever. And my cousin ran into my mother. Now, my cousin had ran into me a few days beforehand, and then she gave my mother my contact information, which I wasn't real happy about. But there was these situations that kept coming up involving my mother trying to get back in contact with me, and they were really out of the way, incredibly bizarre situations that there was some kind of gear somewhere, something was happening to make these things keep happening. And I kept saying, no, I don't want to talk to my mom. I don't want to talk to my mom. Finally, I gave in and did contact with her, and we patched things up as best as we could, which was good because a few months later she ended up passing away. But it was one of those situations where it was like the remote possibility of my cousin being in this obscure town and that bus happening to stop there and run into my cousin, and then my cousin running into me, who I hadn't seen in several years, just happened to walking into the business that I worked at and running into me. those are the kind of synchronicities that I run into. It's like, no, my mom's looking for me. I've got her phone number. I want to talk to her. Somebody else. Yeah, your mom, you ran into my mom somewhere, right? Yeah, blah, blah. And then finally it was like, all right, here's a situation where I have to now deal with this. And I don't think that I can't see where that would be somebody on the outside trying to tempt me or to do anything like that with me I don't see any gain that somebody would have from the outside to try to do that kind of thing. But these are the kinds of things I run into synchronicity wise. Like they're scary. They're usually not harmful synchronicities. They're usually not bad, but they usually have forced me to confront something like job, family, just off the wall things that for one reason or other, I have to confront them in my life. I've never quite looked at them as a paranormal incident, but it's still the way that these things happen is still out there in the realm of the strange and the unusual to where, again, I go back to my wife where my wife was like, eventually you're going to have to talk to your mom. Your mom is coming back into your life for a reason. Now, Christians or people are faced with that's God trying to put you guys back together again. Chaos people would be like, that's the universe trying to tell you need to be back together or you need to make this kind of contact kind of thing happen. But everybody who from the outside who sees it says, yeah, this is something that, this is supposed to happen. And that's the conversation when my wife says something, these things happen. I'm like, this is just something that's supposed to happen. So I got to deal with it, I guess, but it's frustrating because I don't want to, but it's forcing me to.
Well, it's sort of forcing you into a liminal phase of your life. I mean, I think that's sort of a nice sort of tangent that we can branch off onto.
Absolutely. And why? So let's throw this one to Jeff. Why is anti-structure and liminality, why does that stuff draw this phenomena in?
I don't know.
All right. Okay then. I always
my mentor would say that's not a productive question to ask. And I know that's a frustrating answer to get, but right now we don't know. I've kind of in recent months come to kind of a thought about it that I think I hear George Hansen saying that's reducing everything to a psychological aspect, and I don't think that's it. And I say to myself, well, not completely. So maybe he wouldn't react the way that I'm thinking. My thought is, as we were talking before, a lot of things about perception, the nature of human perception, what we perceive and what we don't, what the brain dampens out and what it doesn't at certain times. And I think that notion of, say, an anti-structural situation, and that is, to me is best exemplified by the couple who gets married and they buy their dream home, right? And it's a fixer-upper. And so they're living in the house, but they're also fixing it up. And so they're a new couple, number one. They're living together, number two. Big life change. Two of them right there. Probably some of the most major they're going to experience in their lives. Number three, new house. So new surroundings. Number three, renovating that house. And so what comes from that is irregular sleep patterns, not eating at the same times, perhaps not eating well, not eating what they normally do. Not sleeping in the same spot, nor sleeping in the same way. So, when you talk about your home being kind of your oasis in the chaos of the world, this is the place you go to feel safe, secure, in routine. When that's cast out, this is when paranormal stuff seems. This is when you'll invariably hear these stories on these all of these ghost shows. We bought the house, and when we tore down the wallpaper, suddenly it's like clockwork. All I ask is for anybody to kind of keep track of the story and notice when the instances begin to happen. So is that a portion of, like, you could look at it from the standpoint, environmental change is making this manifest out of nowhere. You can look at it from that standpoint. The other standpoint you can look at it from is that there is a physiological change when you are under stress, when you are under the liminal state, living the anti-structural lifestyle. And we can't also forget about that when you are renovating your home, that's a creative process. And the creative process is another big one that figures into this paranormal thing. So when all those things are going, is there a physiological change in the brain that allows you to perceive things that are already in the mix? You just don't perceive them at any other time. Is the state of being reflected by the behavior that you're partaking in? And so that allows you to perceive these strange things, which end up being a haunting, that sort of thing. Now, all that goes out the window when you think that there's an inordinate amount of UFO sightings that happen around construction sites. Well, why? Why would that matter? Then you've got things like poltergeist phenomena, which affects the environment, which shows that it can interact with the environment, with you, with your body, with your possessions, all of that. So, is it something that comes from the perception, or it's allowed to be perceived through brain chemistry changes that we don't understand yet, which then basically draws it into our quote-unquote reality, whatever that means, that then it can become unhinged from that and become autonomous on its own. Yeah, I mean, all those things are valid to talk about, but the end result is we haven't really, there's never been a serious study done, previewed, that's what we're doing next with Project Core, of the liminal state. Finding out what else is attached to liminality, what else is attached to anti-structure, trying to find out from pinnacle cases. Wouldn't you like to know what was going on in Travis Walton's life at the time?
Yeah.
Not what he talks about in a lecture. I'm talking about what he doesn't talk about in a lecture.
Were you in an off-again, on-again relationship with your girlfriend?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, he mentions that there was animosity between him and one of the other men on the crew, right? So that may have figured into something. Was that crew member new? Had he been there a while? What was his situation? He obviously had, or at least it's always been portrayed to me as some kind of trouble with the law. He was kind of a sketchy character. So that figures in. The marginal aspects of this all figure in very nicely. I think that's like a perfect storm situation. So what draws this stuff in to manifest in front of multiple people? I mean, again, we just don't know enough about the mechanical aspects of anti-structure and liminal states enough to answer that question of why.
Well,
why is the $10 million question?
And digging in a little bit deeper to that, and sort of coming back around to this idea of long-term observation projects, you see a lot of skeptics who are always like, well, why are ghost hunter shows always in the dark? Why do they need to go there at night? Right. And I noticed that, the your project is from 2 a.m. to daybreak. Do you think perhaps that sort of 2 to 3 a.m. time frame has something to do with the transition into REM sleep, which is sort of possibly a liminal state, a liminal subconscious state as well, a transitional state?
Yeah, I think that there's, I mean, I've mentioned 3 a.m. to a lot of people, and I'm pretty sure that George Hansen, who again, I ping a lot of questions off of him. I don't believe he sees a lot to that, but just in my own looking around, you figure things like 3 a.m. in any given time zone, you're as far away from the sun as you will possibly be. That's an interesting fact there, right?
Well, it's also known throughout history as the witching hour, I believe, too. Or
exactly.
Is that 2 a.m.? Yeah.
I mean, you got this kind of, night to me is the most liminal thing because it's between days. So if you want to go for the between thing, there it is. You can find this stuff all over.
But night seems more like an opposite rather than a liminal time. A liminal time would be like twilight or daybreak, right?
Well, think of it this way. It's also when you can't see exactly clearly. And so immediately you're marginalized by saying, I was in the dark and saw this. Well, how'd you see it when it was in the dark? So you're immediately put into that marginal state, the easily dismissed area, by being at night. These ghost hunters with the performance investigators, they do that. It's a lot of times it's for dramatic effect, but
right.
But in their defense, number one, there's nothing saying you can't do it at any time of day. But in their defense, when I did a ghost stakeout in Gettysburg at Mark Nesbitt's place. It was the quietest house I ever have spent a night in. And I was there with Jeremy Vaney, my wife, my son, and 2 of our listeners. And we were all amazed at how quiet it was. I mean, it was really quiet. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, Jeremy and I very clearly heard a church bell outside ring very loudly. And I said to Jeremy at the time, can you believe a church bell at 3 a.m.? Like, what is that about? They're waking up the entire town, right? And then the 2 listeners, the 2 listeners were downstairs with a recorder in a secondary room, which Mark's house from the front to the back is the oldest. The next room up is a little newer, and newer. So it gets more current as it goes forward. They were in the second oldest part of the house, and they recorded. I heard on the tape, you can hear Jason say, is that kids? And you hear Lisa say, yes, it's kids. Very strange to hear children chattering and playing. He said it was like they were playing outside. They were singing and playing. This is on record. We've got it on a camera in the stairwell towards the front of the building. It's the same noise. It stopped when I came down the steps. She said it just stopped. Now, fast forward a couple of months ahead, you find out that Jason is attracted to Lisa. Not my wife, Lisa, a listener. There's this, but he's got a girlfriend. So there's this taboo going on, which is another thing that figures into this. So out of everybody in the house, who experiences the most interesting thing firsthand of the night? The 2 people who really shouldn't have been down there alone together. It was a very unusual dynamic for that to happen. And it was at 3 a.m. Exactly 3 a.m. That place erupted. Why? I mean, I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, you can look at it as a liminal time, as far as like you were saying, Josh, with REM sleep and all of that. That's possible. It's also time that when you listen to Terrence McKenna, where he says there's the natural DMT dump into the brain. Does that play into it? And none of this is to relegate this, again, to the psychological. You can perceive things in altered states that you may not perceive in other places. We call those, quote-unquote, hallucinations.
Right.
And my problem is, what does that mean, hallucination?
Well,
because
everything you take in is an hallucination.
It's all psychological, right? So, so there it is. How do you define, a psychological thing and say, well, that's a hallucination? You didn't really see that, because that would be crazy. Right. That's crazy. But I don't do drugs. And a lot of other people don't do drugs or drink. And we're not crazy because we've been tested. Like, we went to the same psychiatry schools as everybody else. And here it is, non-pathological personalities are seeing weird stuff. And so there's that. So you've got brain chemistry going on. You've got all of these different liminal states and anti-structural behavior and the creative process, which I think needs to be like the third of that little group of weird frameworks to look at. The creative process, I think, is part and parcel. I think we are part of a co-creative process with this. Whether it reaches out or we reach in, it's a two-way street. I do believe that.
Well, you look at the people who've been attracted to this subject. It's always creative types. Mm-hmm. Myself, yourself, included.
Yeah, and that goes right to the point of it's really easy. It's funny when Roejen says, when he tells people about his show, oh, well, you're weird. You're blah. Well, that's what I get. Except I don't get, well, you're weird. It's, well, you're an artist. So where did what? No, let's really examine that for a second. Like, I want to know, where did that come from? Where was it ever written that an artist is marginal because he's creative? What does that mean?
Because it implies that you're simply creating it and that you have an active imagination. It's kind of like looking at a child.
That's the surface level of it. I'm talking about, where did the stereotype of the artist is flighty? That doesn't come from that. That comes from something else. That comes from that artists throughout time. There have been effects on style. You become the creator of style, and you become. The advertising community. This is a creative endeavor. I'm in it. I've been in it for 30 years. And I laugh and I jokingly say this to people, but I say, we rule the world. We tell you what you like. Ain't this cool? Check it out. You want this, don't you? Yes, you do.
It comes from an obsession with the other world, I think, really, is what it is. It comes from an obsession with what is beyond the current trappings that we're, nailed to, as it were.
And I think it comes from, something that Jeff Kripal is really big on, which is externalizing the internal.
I would just like to state for the record real quickly that Jeff Ritzmann has just stated that he is a member of the Illuminati.
Right.
Jacques.
Yeah. I want my money. But this is what the creative process is externalizing the internal. You have an idea, you bring it to everyone else, and I think there's something to that when you're talking about the UFO phenomena, the ghost phenomena. If it's all sentient external things, are they approaching things or people or entities that they believe can best convey the event? It is so incredibly much more bizarre than people want to admit. Like the performance abductee, we'll talk about the little doctors and the ovum and the sperm and the alien babies and the hybrid program and all that. People that I've met for the past 30 years, like, you rarely hear that. Like, you hear things like, they had my mother with them, and she's been dead for 15 years.
Right.
And you hear things like, I was here one minute, and the next minute I was laughing about something. I don't know what I'm laughing about, but everybody's laughing with me. It's like we all told a big joke, and somewhere in the middle, I felt like somebody came into my house. Okay?
Yeah, jumps in consciousness.
Yes. And so how does one go about explaining that, or how does one verbalize, I saw a white square in my vision, and no matter where I looked, there it was, and I whited out. And to be able to tell these kinds of stories, number one, you gotta pretty much say to yourself, well, I feel this is important enough that I'm going to humiliate myself to my fellow man, which is exactly what I've done. You can think I'm crazy. That's fine by me. You don't have to live with this. I do. And, and I've said this to my writer, my author friend recently. It's one thing to come on Where Did the Road Go and talk with you great people about this stuff, but it's like a whole nother level when it's standing in the floor staring you down. That's like you don't wish that on people. Like, I don't. I certainly don't.
Didn't I say that earlier?
It's just
great people and Roejen,
it's one of those things that people, they engage with it and they like to hear about it and they find it interesting. But I think you're on a different wavelength when it's affecting your life and you have to figure out why.
And you're like me. When somebody says, how do I get into this kind of stuff? I tell them, go away. Don't get involved with it. Walk away. Stay out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I usually tell people the same thing. It's like, you know what? Because you might open a can of worms that you're not ready to deal with. And again, I go back to my skeptical friend that we were talking about on my show, where they say, well, I want to be a part of this. I want to do this. And I'm like, you can't. You're not invited to the party.
Well, I got, after I did this program the last time, I got an email exchange for, I don't know, a couple of email exchanges where it started out with, I dearly wish, I've never had a paranormal experience in my life, and I dearly wish to just have one of what you experienced, just one. I just want to have one thing. And I said to him, really, with without even thinking about it. I'm like, you have no idea what you're asking for, because, and that's the part I don't think that people get. And I don't get asked this anymore, and I'm kind of glad I don't, but people used to ask me, how do you live? Like, how do you get up and go to work and care about it? Knowing because it's like one of those things where it's not a question for me. It's only a question for the people that don't experience it. Like, I know what I see. I know what happened to me. I know what my wife and I saw. But other people don't know that. It's a mystery for them. It's no mystery for me.
Yeah,
the only mystery is, what is it and why?
Ultimately, you still have to get up in the morning and go pay your bills and go to work and stuff.
And that's what I tell them. I said, because what other choice do I have?
You're not going to be able to call the bank and say, I'm sorry, I can't make the house payment this week because I'm seeing a white floating square going through my living room.
Right.
The bank's not going to go, oh, well, okay, don't worry about it.
We gotcha. Right.
Yeah, you're good.
We've had aliens before, Mr. Ritzmann. It's okay. You'll get you next month.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't happen. See,
And Steve Ray says the Gettysburg sounds were both romantic omens. Do I hear wedding bells? Sounds like children on the way. And of course, you said the one guy was attracted to the girl there. So
yeah,
but it seems like it's externalized.
Yeah, well, he was involved with somebody else,
right?
Who was, and I knew her. She was extraordinarily possessive. Like, she would have wrung his neck if she'd have known he was down there with her in this little room in the dark with recorders. Like, that was not good, right? And so, he expressed to me that he was interested in maybe dating this girl, and so on. So I said, look, I don't want to know about any of that. But that's a really interesting point that you're going in that direction, because that didn't come out of the blue. That probably stemmed from that. Guys have an attraction to a girl. They meet in a place, and there's an attraction there. And whether it's reciprocal is irrelevant. The guy is interested. And so there's that taboo. Well, I got a girlfriend, but I like this girl, but I don't know. So, and I'm here, but she's not here. And so all of that, that to me was like the ding, ding, ding moment where I said, okay, this could be the crux of why them, but children have been reported in the house before. So Mark did say there are two things to look for. One is a Confederate soldier or a Union soldier in the front room, and the second thing is children. And we got kids. I got a photograph that I can't really, again, it's one of those ones that I can't exactly verify what it is. But it looks like a kid in the room that they were in, looking towards the camera. A lot of processing to get to that point, so I don't know how much of it is pareidolia and not, but it's interesting. And it's down on Mark's wall in his house now for people to see. What I make of it, I don't know. All I know is the 3 a.m. And by the way, that church bell doesn't happen. Doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Is there a church in the area?
Yes, not too far. I want to say, like, if you drew a diagonal line to 2 blocks away, I think it's round about there. So if you're standing in the front of his place on the main road, if you drew a diagonal line to the right, it would be back in there somewhere. That's where it sounded like it came from. I asked Mark about it like the next day. I said, so what's with the church bell ringing at like 3 a.m.? What is that about? Because that was really loud. He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, because that does not happen.
Have you actually heard the real church bell from the real church? Have you gone there and actually heard it?
No. And so, and I said, well, we heard it. And he goes, well, that's an absurd notion, because such a thing doesn't happen. Everybody in the town would be awakened.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's what Jeremy and I said. Now, curiously, only Jeremy and I heard it. Nobody else in the house heard it. Everybody else was downstairs doing their little walkthroughs and EVP sessions. Jeremy and I were upstairs, and we heard it. And we looked at each other like, what? So, again, this selective, tunneled experience where it's only, I'm going to only take 2 of you and give you this. I'm only going to take these 2 downstairs and give them that. This very targeted experience, this very personal experience, that's been a long-held hallmark of the UFO and the ghost phenomena, is almost tailor-made experiences for an individual. This is not going to like governmental agencies to ask for permission. This is going right to the individual. It is a personal experience. I mean, it's the antithesis of that statement. So make all that what you will.
Okay. All right. It almost seems like it's a feedback loop sometimes, too. Like it may not be an external thing that we're interacting with at times. It's just us feeding back into reality somehow.
Jeff has a thing that he says for this, and I'm going to cut it off and say it for him. He's made the comparison. There's a song from Pink Floyd called Run Like Hell, where it's got the echo at the beginning and it goes out and it echoes back. Mm-hmm. And he's compared that to this before.
It is. Because if you take an analog delay and you hit one note, ka-kunk, and it goes ka-kunk, ka-kunk, if you turn the frequency up on that, in other words, repeat it more, not only does it feed back onto itself and become something else, but it gets extraordinarily weird, right? So how weird is it that we're putting out frequencies like aliens and UFOs and all this stuff, and it comes back to us as aliens and UFOs, but it comes back like, yeah, I'm an alien, but here's a piece of cake. Like, what? So it's, or...
I'm going to go to your fridge and grab a Coke. What?
Yeah, I mean, so it's this self-negating, weird, bizarre beyond words experience is what it comes back at, almost as if it's an out-of-control response to your initial click. I
tend to wonder if, using the trickster theory, I tend to wonder if this is something that's just not messing with us, having a good laugh. And it's like, all right, let's tweak this a little bit to see just how much we can mess with this person. Because it's bad enough someone to say, yeah, I had an alien in my house, but they're not going to say, I had an alien in my house and he gave me a piece of cake and then he went and got a Coke out of the fridge. It's like, all right, I might be able to believe you had an alien in your house, but I'm not going to believe that it gave you a Coke and a piece of cake. And this thing's going, okay, this is great. Now let's see what we can do.
I mean, go ahead, Josh. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I would argue that whatever the liminality of existence that the phenomena tends to be attracted to, that sort of reinforces that. It reinforces the absurdity. It reinforces the anti-structural nature of that experience. So I think it's sort of like it's almost sort of amplifying the sort of environment that's drawn to it in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the thing to mention the most in a discussion about all this is when you say trickster theory, we're not really talking about like an entity. Like, I know what your comparison is, Roejen, with the notion of it's getting a good laugh and all that, but I think a lot of people make that mistake because a lot of people who really don't know trickster theory that well, like, try to make it out to be like a Joker entity that's doing these things, pulling these strings, but it's really more like abstract thought, more so than that.
I don't think that is the answer, but I think it is a answer. I think that it could be something out there that's just doing this and having a laugh, but I don't think that is the only card in the deck here.
No.
By any means, but it's something that could be out there. Like, you know what? It's just, this person's into UFOs. Let's do this. Let's just have a little bit of fun with them. Or it could be any number of things, that are along those lines. And
you can go from the standpoint that that there is. This is what I can deduce in my own head if I can verbalize this right. If you want to look at trickster theory. So you say to yourself, well, it self-negates, it deals with marginal events and liminal personalities and liminal places and things. Everything seems to be working against itself from being believed. And like Jacques Vallée said, to talk about this experience with 100% honesty is to be thought a fool, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that is absolutely true. So why is it self-negating? Well, it's that by simple, deduction says, well, it's hiding something. It's being purposefully deceptive because it's putting something up in front of what we're going for an answer, no matter what tangent you want to approach this from, okay? It's putting something up to block us. The question is, what is it hiding?
Is it hiding something, or is it trying to show us the outline of something we can't see directly?
And that could be the other possibility. Right?
And see, I have a third tangent, which is it will try to express itself in cultural normative ways that will leave all the other people who hip to the high strange aspects completely out in the wilderness, you know?
Right.
So, like, if there isn't sort of disclosure movement, it will not really address the real issues that we all have with this experience.
Well, why should it? It's
Right.
you know what would be the point of that? You know.
Yeah.
I don't. You know. I don't. There's again. Going back to the my trickster thing is what purpose would that serve? You know, it's I don't understand what that would, you know, that if anything it would take it and add to it. It would take that and throw it into the slurry to mix more with it.
But it's an inversion on that old adage that I think might have originated with The Usual Suspects film. The greatest trick the devil pulled was that he didn't exist. Well, perhaps the greatest trick that the UFO phenomena could pull was that it does exist in some sort of concrete way, which sort of turns everything on its head, and it leaves, you know, it's sort of like a double cross, double agent sort of thing where it turns the tricksterism on its head. Like, I'm being double tricksy, and now you're all screwed because. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's take all this stuff that some people are sure they believe in and a lot of people aren't sure they believe in. Let's just mix it all up and throw it out there because none of it can be proven. So
Right.
that becomes the playground at that point.
And I think you know, if you listen to, I think Terrence McKenna has the best UFO story to talk about the marginal, the liminal, the anti-structure, all of that. You know, the guys in the Amazon, they're experimenting with mushrooms. You know, in his defense, he is familiar with every kind of hallucinatory drug that is possible and their effects. He's experienced all of them. He is lightly intoxicated on mushrooms. He has a UFO sighting. It passes over him at very close range, and it's a Damski's flying saucer, which is nonsense.
It looks
Demonstrable
fake as hell, he said.
nonsense. Yes,
Yeah.
it's fake as fake can be. And so if that, you know, like I think, and I,
You could see the string on it.
I mean, I in my own goings with this stuff, I have been exposed to things that I go, there's no way I'm buying that. There's no way that could possibly be real, because I know that is not true. You know, and yet there it is. And
Have
so,
you ever been inclined to just look at it and say, all right, I know you're just messing with me, so what's the point here? You know, have you ever had that moment where you've just wanted to laugh at it?
usually, most times, I'm a little worried about where is it going and where am I? When it comes to a UFO sighting type thing, like my eyes don't go off of it, and I'm looking for the nearest thing I can get under, even though that doesn't matter.
Because no matter how innocuous you think it is, it still has some very real physical repercussions. You know?
I think there is. Yeah, I think that you know, to call this an interesting subject is true, but I think that people need to be aware that there is a sort of implied threat about it that I don't think you can really ignore. Not after this long of people experiencing what they have. You know, yeah, there is something to be feared in it, I do believe. But by the same token, when we talk about how it manifests, and you talk about the bizarreness of it and all of that, you know, imagine if you're a consciousness that is expressing itself in a multitude of ways. The UFO is one manifestation, the alien is another. I had remarked earlier that, you know, if you cut a UFO in half, I don't think there's anything in it. Mm-hmm. It's empty. It's a symbol. It's a representation of something else. It's a representation of a consciousness or something like that that's expressing itself, but it's doing so in a way that, like Seriah said earlier, represents a cultural filter. Well, so people see one thing.
It's a hollow chocolate Easter bunny, right?
Yes, and on one hand, it's begging you to take a bite. For probably some reason that goes along the lines of being able to manifest better or more frequently. But on the other side of things, you know, if you take a bite, it goes boogity boogity boogie, and you recoil in abject horror. But by that same token, you know that you can live with that. You can say that, but when you express fear at something that maybe doesn't understand the modality of communication, its response is, oh, you want, I'm just going to say fear, but it would know. It would just know the emotion that's coming at it. You know what I'm saying? Like if you go to some other planet and you meet the lesser evolved being and you say, "Hi, I'm Seriah," and it looks at you and goes, "Nah!" What is your reaction going to be? You're going to go, "Okay, nah!" Right?
Yeah.
So if it says, "Oh, you want to be scary? I can be scary," and there you have it. Or
what about the
you
people
were
who are
waking
like-
up out of a dream and you've got all these weird things jumbled in your head? I can be that too.
It's like, well, what about the situation? Well, I was enveloped by a beautiful light, and I just felt so calm and at peace. And
You haven't met people like this?
no, I mean, what about those kind of people then? For the most
Those are
part,
the people that come out from a sense of innocence. I mean, look at Dorothy Izod. She had positive experiences at the onset until her preacher said, "You know what you're experiencing is of the devil." And then all of a sudden the next day she said things were scurrying into corners.
That falls apart when you have people who have near-death experiences who have led this very antagonistically atheist lifestyle and have negative near-death experiences. Not necessarily, not that I'm demonizing atheists in any sort of way, but like you see that's a recurring motif.
Right. I don't know. I mean, there's not one puzzle piece that fits at all.
there's one thing that we have to take into account, though, and I think I mentioned this when Jeff was on my show earlier, is that we are a special kind of person. We deal with this stuff. We study this stuff. We talk to people. We're kind of immersed in this murk ourselves. But you take an average person that's from everyday life, that's going to work, paying their bills, doing whatever, and they have an experience and they have no frame of reference, and something happens to them, it's a completely different kind of world. It's a completely different kind of thing for them. I was talking before about like when I saw the thing that I saw a few years ago floating down the road or whatever the heck it was, even being submersed in everything that I've been doing, researching this stuff for years and stuff like that, even as I'm looking at it, trying to figure out what it was. I remember I wanted to call Jeff Ritzmann that night. Again, it was at 3:00 in the morning. It was a witching hour.
I was up, so.
I know. I wish I had called you because I don't know what you would have told me, because I would have been like, "Jeff, this is what I'm seeing right now. This is what's going on, blah, blah, blah." I just wanted to tell somebody that wouldn't think I was completely nuts. I told Jeremy, and Jeremy was like, "Well, what would I have been able to tell you?" I'm like, "I don't know." But I remember after it was all over with thinking, I'm like, if I was average Joe and I was, doing my thing at work that night, I didn't know what was going on or whatever, and I saw this thing going down the road, and I had nobody I could talk to, because if I were the average Joe Schmo who just had this experience, I wouldn't be able to. Would I tell people? What would they think of me? Would they laugh at me? And even after a while, I got to a point where I didn't want to talk about it at all anymore either. But I could easily see where somebody would say, "You know what? I just had this happen to me." And then they start getting involved with the quote unquote wrong crowd, because those are the people that are willing to listen to them and say, "Oh yeah, you saw this? Well, this is what it was. This is the Space Brothers that are coming here." And we're different, though. We've studied this stuff, and we know the charlatans and stuff to look out for. But the average person that has an experience like this, you can see how somebody would go down the wrong path and get involved in the wrong stuff.
But do you see the notion that you saw this thing, and it's a big if this was the phenomena that you witnessed, okay? Let's take it from that it is, okay? Is it lost on you that the notion of that is you're easily dismissed from that? Like, to talk to the average Joe, like you're saying, it's easy for the average Joe to dismiss you because you're already into this weird stuff and you're already easily dismissible.
Well, when it happened, right after it happened, I immediately went on Facebook because I wanted to have some kind of place to document. I said, "This is what just happened to me." And almost instantaneously, I remember I got off of work several hours later and deleted the post, but it was immediately, "Oh, Roejen seeing little green men," and blah, blah,
there
blah.
you are. Yeah.
And I was like,
What did you see, Roejen?
okay, I was at the time. I'll tell the story quickly.
Yeah, we're
at the
almost
time
out of
I was
time.
okay. How much time do I have? I'll put it that way.
Just go.
Okay. I was working midnights as a job. I was delivering bread to nursing homes and hospitals and schools. I was going down this back road that I had gone down every single night. So, and the clouds were low that night. It was rain. It was in November. And I looked over and I saw a circular pattern of lights. One would get dimmer, the next one would get brighter, that one would get dimmer, the next one would get brighter. It was doing it in a clockwise fashion, moving down the direction of this road. And at first I said, oh, they must have put a new cell phone tower up or something, and that's what the lights are. And I got to the intersection, and I looked down the road, and it was moving away from me. So I parked my truck, got out, walked in the middle of the intersection, looked down the road, and it was moving away. So I'm like, well, I never at point did I go, that's a UFO. I'm like, that's not going to be a plane. I'm going through, what is this? So I knew all this stuff. I stuck my hand out, put my thumb out, measured how big it was from my down my arm. It was about the size of a nickel by the size of my thumb with one eye closed and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, it can't be a blimp because of the temperature. And I was going through all this stuff. And then it faded out and it reappeared going in a completely different direction. And it just rematerialized, for lack of a better word, going into a different direction completely. And then it disappeared again and reappeared at a point between those 2 points going into another direction. And then it completely faded out. None of this happened really fast. But up until the point, I was completely convinced that I was seeing some kind of a plane, but I just didn't know what it was. It was a curiosity. Once I saw it disappear and then reappear and then do it again, then my brain, that was the weird point where my brain was like, you're not looking at a plane. You don't know what the heck you're looking at. And it didn't make any sense. And that sense of disconnect of like, okay, now I'm seeing something other than what I can comprehend, that was what really tweaked me and what bothered me. And then after it completely disappeared, I mean, I didn't get anything out of it. I wasn't given the secrets to the universe. I wasn't abducted. I wasn't probed. I didn't have any missing time. I literally just saw lights going down the road in the sky. There was an airport in the direction that it was going, so I kept assuming that's a plane or something, but it was going way too slow for it to be a plane. And then that was what really screwed me up. And even knowing what I know and doing the stuff that I've listened to and listening to Jeff and listening to everybody over all these years, explain the stuff, when it happened, I still could not wrap my head around the fact that I had saw something beyond my realm of comprehension to easily be able to explain away. And especially when it disappeared. And I've had, you saw a drone. I've had people, before I even get a quarter of the way into the story, you saw a drone, you saw this, you saw that. And I've seen there's either people that flat out believe you, which I question because it's like, well, are you believing me because you know me and you're just trying to be a good friend, or do you legitimately believe me? And then you've got the other ones that are stark, no, you didn't see a UFO. Or what it comes down to in the end is the one that I hate, the one that I go to that I hate using and I hate hearing is, well, I don't think you saw something, but I think you believe that you saw something. In both situations, the people who believe and the people that don't, I always go back to, you know what, you weren't there. You can't understand. You just cannot understand until you've actually seen this kind of thing in person.
And that's always been my stance when someone tells me a story, is that we can't judge what that experience was because we weren't there.
And at the same time, their disbelief in what happened to me doesn't invalidate my experience.
No.
So it's one of those situations where I don't like to tell the story to people like I used to because, number one, it's not going to change anything, so nobody really needs to know about it. And the other thing is I don't want to hear one way or another if they agree with me or don't agree with me because I really don't have a stance to go on. And you kind of get to a point where you're just like, all right, whatever. But what amazed me is when I first posted that it happened, everybody was like, oh, Roejen seeing little green men and blah, blah, blah. And that was frustrating because it's like, no, I'm not going to lie about this. I don't. I had one listener that said, call me up, talk to me. So I called him up and I said, hey, the first person I talked to, literally minutes after it happened, I'm going, blah, 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 I'm going a million miles an hour. I'm like, yeah, man, you saw a UFO. And yeah, my car's in the shop. The transmission went bad on it. I got to get it fixed. And it's like, all right, I got to go. But I love the guy. He's still a listener of the show. And I don't blame him. But I don't think I slept for like 2 days solid. And again, every night I would go by that road. A couple of nights I stopped. I went there in the daytime. And for a while I locked on it. And I locked on it really intensely. Eventually I just, okay, nothing's going to come out of this. The
Did
next
you go
night,
out at night for it?
Oh, yeah, because I went down that same road every night because I worked every night, working midnight. So I passed that location the very next night I stopped. The night was clear. And a police officer saw me standing in the middle of the road. He was on patrol, and he eventually pulled me over down the road and gave me a ticket for something stupid, which I got thrown away in court. But I didn't want to tell him, yeah, officer, I saw a UFO last night, and I was just here looking, to get bearings of where everything was in a clear night and whatever. I just kind of went along with it, but the ticket was dismissed and stuff. But I went back there in the daytime, And if people have asked me if I had to do it over again, what would you do different? I said I would have gotten in my truck and turned down the road, and I would have went towards it. You know, just something. I needed to be something to be more material, other than what any kind of more sensory, more I could have got out of it would have been beneficial in some way or another. I don't know how or what, but even the thing is the experience that.
You there?
Here, you know, hello.
Yeah.
Okay.
I heard the experience and then it cut.
No, the experience I had was nothing that spectacular.
But it had an effect on you.
Yeah, like right now, every time I tell the story and get into it, I go back to it again, which is why I'm talking at 1,000,000 miles an hour right now. But, you know, it's like when I told Jeff, I was like, man, I wish I'd have called him as it was happening to say, this is what's going on right now. This is what I'm seeing. And the reason that I didn't is when Jeff was on the show, and I remember him saying, you know, when people call me and say they see a UFO, I don't even want to talk to them anymore unless they can tell me how many windows were on the ship. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't see any windows. I can't call Jeff. And that was literally why I did not call him.
See, that doesn't go for you guys. So just so you know, I'm up until like 3 o'clock every night. And,
but had I called you and said, Jeff, this is what I'm seeing right now, what would you have told me? I wouldn't expect you to give me any answers or whatever, but you know, I've always been curious. If I had called you and said, Jeff, this is what I'm seeing right now, I don't expect you to give me an answer. I just need to tell you what's going on.
I mean, what my first reaction would probably not have been to your benefit to do, which is stop the truck, get out.
I was already out.
Look at it, you know, and take it in. Like throw everything you got open to it, and really, really permanize the memory, you know,
yeah,
like get that in. And that usually happens by virtue of what it is. But you know, you talk about going back and that you never saw it again, and this, that, and the other. And I'm down with what you're saying. And here's the thing, kids, don't try this at home. I'm not kidding. Don't try this at home.
No, don't. I'll say that too, because it does. You know, even knowing what I know and everything that I'm involved in, it's still tweaked me a little bit. But I still haven't told my wife about it.
If you had gone back at night and found a place to park where you wouldn't have got hassled by the fuzz, right?
Yeah.
So you go back and you park. I can pretty much tell you, and I don't know how I can say this with such assurance other than I know because I've done it 5 days in a row. Every night. Back there, thinking about it, looking for it, and it would have been there. 5 days.
I drove there every night for work, and I never saw it again. And I would always stop and look.
Staying. I'm talking not like.
Yeah, I don't
for 10
think
minutes.
I want to go back and deal with it again.
Well,
though.
that's it. That's just it.
I think I'm fine.
You know, it demands. It seems to demand some sort of devotion to itself, which ties into like focus and intent and all of that. Like, what is your intent coming here? To stand here in the dark, you know?
I remember thinking, I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to get out of this? Okay, I'm seeing some lights and it disappears, and I'm like, if this is supposed to be some kind of a message for me or something, I'm not getting anything out of this except for now I'm a half hour behind at work.
Well,
you know,
and again, my question to you would after it was all over, my question to you would have been, and you don't have to answer this on air by any stretch, but again, what is going on? You know, look at what's going on in your life. Look at what you're doing. Look at your life situation. Look at your stress levels. All of these things, depending on how close it was. I mean, was this meant for you? It stands to reason it probably was, that when you think to yourself, this can't be what I'm seeing, and then it makes a reaction by virtue of that thought to make you know, no, it really is what you're seeing. You know, that goes back to my thing from 20 years ago telling
I
people,
must have really irritated it because I didn't walk away with any kind of greater message other than, okay, now I'm screwing with you. And it's
well, that is the message. The message is, you're here. I see you. You see me. You know, this is the thing about UFO sightings, you know. That's the thing about UFO sightings that is amazing to me, is like when you witness something like that, I think it's pretty safe to say, with a pretty good percentage of certainty, I could say, if you see it, it sees you.
Yeah.
Okay. And by that virtue alone, I would have told you, think to yourself, come over here, come closer, you know, or get further away from me, or do something to let me know what's going on. Now, I'm not saying it would have responded and said, okay, here, you know, here's this,
Tim Binnall said the same thing. He said I was an idiot because I didn't try to talk to it.
I'm telling you, I laughed too.
That's Tim
when
Binnall,
I first thought of that, I mean, I laughed too. I said, that's ridiculous. But no, you know,
like,
this
no, I
is,
didn't talk to it. I sat there and looked at it and tried to figure out what it was.
Right.
Well, you should have talked to it.
And the idea that you think it's some kind of aircraft, that's by no means like, that's completely like what I thought. At my pinnacle event with my wife, it's like, yeah, that's got to be some kind of stars or a plane of some kind, but why is it still? And you're just trying to turn it over in your head because your eye is seeing something that your brain is saying can't be possible, and there it is. So,
all right. So we are just about out of time. So real quick, websites. Let's start with Roejen.
www.projectarchivist.com. We are a somewhat, as much as possible, weekly podcast. Come check us out. We're available on iTunes, pretty much any place that you can find any kind of podcast whatsoever. And we're also available on Stitcher, Project Archivist without the T, because Twitter doesn't allow you to have enough numbers or letters and stuff in your name. But yeah, give us a shot. We're not always serious. We do try to approach this stuff with a good laugh and have a good time with it as much as we can.
Jeff?
wow. Well, there's a couple. There's ParatopiaOculus.com, which is the podcast that I do with Jeremy Vaney, and that is as infrequent as Roejen's is frequent. So we figure anti-structural, thing that we're trying to study, we're going to be as anti-structural as possible. So we do it when we feel like it, but I guarantee you 3+ hours usually of head twisting stuff. And it's devoid of guests for the most part. It's mainly Jeremy and I investigating thought processes on all this stuff, and getting in a little more depth. So you can start from episode 1. I think we're on 12 or 13 now. And then there's the monitoring project is gofundme.com /Project Oculus. OC. Oh my God, it's getting late. OCULUS. And then that will take you to the page where you can see the video presentation.
MICKEYMO.
Right. And if you want to kick $20, that gets you access to the live feeds like forever, and that goes into paying the monitoring fee and maybe buying some more equipment to get further things into the pool to measure things that we're just not getting.
All right.
But I feel we will at some point.
And Josh?
The author of 2 books, A Trojan Feast, and the upcoming book, The Brimstone Deceit, which should be released very soon. Twitter handle is Joshua Cutchin, no underscores or anything. My website is joshuacutchin.com. It's a very ill-maintained blog, as it were. And I can be found here on Where Did the Road Go on kind of a bi-weekly basis.
Just about, yeah.
Just about, yeah.
Sometimes weekly.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah. I want to congratulate you on achieving disinformation agent status, by the way. Very proud of you. Golf clap.
Well,
Very proud.
anyone who wants to be a disinformation agent should meet me behind the Denny's at 2 a.m. So.
And we will be back next week. www.where'dtheroadgo.com. Where'dtheroadgo.com for all your Where Did the Road Go needs. See you later. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.